My future mother-in-law said it at the rehearsal dinner, the night before I was supposed to marry her son. I was 23 years old, standing in the hallway outside the private dining room, adjusting my dress because the zipper had slipped. My strawberry blonde hair was falling out of the updo I'd spent an hour perfecting. I heard her voice through the half-open door, clear as a bell, talking to her sister. I just don't understand what Ryan sees in her. She's pretty enough, I suppose, in that common sort of way. But our son deserves better. Someone with breeding. Someone who knows which fork to use. Her sister laughed. Maybe he'll come to his senses. It's not. I made thin and desperate, stripped of all the superiority I'd grown used to hearing. Brooke, it's Patricia. Please don't hang up. I know we've had our differences, but I'm calling because we need help. Richard and we've lost everything. The house, the investments, everything. We need somewhere to stay, just until we get back on our feet. I was sitting in my home office looking at the framed photo on my desk. Me and Ryan on our wedding day, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. I'd kept that photo through 5 years of her comments, her criticisms, her constant reminders that I wasn't good enough. You should call Ryan, I said calmly. Actually, Patricia, maybe you should call someone better. And I hung up. Let me take you back, because this story isn't about revenge or a house or money. It's about being told you're not worthy and proving them wrong anyway. If you've ever had in-laws who looked at you like you were trash, if you've ever been dismissed because you didn't come from the right family, if you've ever built a life so solid that the people who doubted you had to come crawling back, you already know this story isn't about them. It's about you and what you're worth. I grew up in a trailer park outside of Louisville, Kentucky. Not the nice kind they show in movies, the kind with community pools and neat little gardens. The kind where the plumbing broke every winter and the roof leaked when it rained, and my mother worked double shifts at the diner just to keep the electricity on. My father was a question mark, a name on a birth certificate I'd never seen, a man who left before I could form memories. It was just me and Mom, scraping by, making do, pretending things were fine when they weren't. I remember being 8 years old, lying in bed listening to my mother cry at the kitchen table because she couldn't make rent that month. I remember wearing the same 3 outfits to school until the seams split. I remember being hungry, really hungry, and telling my mom I wasn't that hungry so she could eat the last of the mac and cheese. That's the childhood Patricia Whitfield would later sneer at. That's the background she thought made me unworthy of her precious son. But that childhood also made me who I am. Resilient, resourceful, determined. I was smart. And I knew smart was my only way out. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. Won a scholarship to the state university, packed everything I owned into 2 garbage bags, and drove 4 hours to a campus where I didn't know a single person. I was terrified. I was also free. I majored in accounting because I'd seen what happened when you didn't understand money. Numbers made sense to me. I worked 2 jobs while carrying a full course load. Mornings at the campus coffee shop, evenings at a call center, weekends studying in the library until my eyes burned. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA, got a job at a mid-size accounting firm, and started building the life I'd always dreamed about. Stable. Secure. Mine. I met Ryan at a coffee shop near my office. I was 21, fresh out of college, 3 months into my first real job. He was 24, working at his father's investment firm, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. He smiled at me across the counter, asked if the seat next to me was taken. I said no. 2 hours later, we were still talking. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. And just like that, my life got complicated in ways I never expected. Ryan, his parents lived in a house that could have fit my entire trailer park in the backyard. His mother wore pearls to breakfast. His father played golf with senators. They were everything I wasn't, and they never let me forget it. The first time I met Patricia and Richard Whitfield, I wore my nicest dress. A navy blue thing I'd bought at a consignment shop. Classic cut, professional. I thought I looked respectable. Patricia looked at me like I'd shown up in a garbage bag. "Ryan didn't mention you were so petite," she said, looking down at my 5'3" frame. "And that hair. Is that your natural color?" I touched my strawberry blonde waves self-consciously. "Yes, it is." "Interesting," she said, in a tone that meant the opposite. Dinner was 3 hours of pointed questions about my family, my background, my ambitions. When Ryan drove me home afterward, I cried in his car for 20 minutes. He was furious with them. Called his mother that night, demanded she apologize. She said she had nothing to apologize for, she was just getting to know me. He said she was being cruel. She said she was being protective. "I'm just looking out for you, sweetheart. Girls like her, they see opportunity. They see your family name and they see a meal ticket. I don't want you to get hurt." He told her I wasn't like that. She said he was too young to know the difference. The pattern was set. We dated for 2 years. 2 years of dinners where Patricia would casually mention Ryan's exes, all of them from good families, all of them so much more suitable. 2 years of Richard treating me like the help, asking me to fetch drinks, to clear plates, to stay out of conversations about business and politics because what would I know about such things? 2. A beautiful ring, a romantic dinner, everything I'd dreamed of. I said yes with my whole heart. Then we told his parents. Patricia's face went through shock, anger, and something like disgust before settling on a smile so fake it could have been plastic. "How wonderful," she said flatly. "When's the happy day?" We said we were thinking about a spring wedding, maybe April. She said that was very soon. She said we should take our time. She said there was no rush, unless there was a reason to rush. She looked at my stomach pointedly. I told her I wasn't pregnant. She looked relieved and disappointed at the same time. The engagement period was warfare disguised as wedding planning. Patricia insisted on being involved in everything, then criticized every choice I made. The venue was too common, the flowers were too cheap. The dress I'd fallen in love with was too revealing for a church. She wanted to control the guest list, the menu, the music, the vows. When I pushed back, she'd call Ryan and cry about how I was excluding her, how I was driving a wedge between them, how she just wanted to help, and I was being so difficult. Then came the rehearsal dinner. The night before the wedding, her last chance to stop what she couldn't control. I was in the hallway, fixing my dress, when I heard her. Every word clear as a knife. "Our son deserves better. Someone with breeding, someone who knows which fork to use. And then, at least she can't get pregnant to trap him. I made sure of that." That last part didn't make sense to me then, but it would. I walked into that dining room with my chin up and my heart frozen. Sat through the toasts, the speeches, the fake smiles. Patricia gave a toast about how Ryan was the light of her life, how she'd always wanted the best for him, how she was so looking forward to welcoming me into the family. She looked right at me when she said, "welcoming," like it was a threat. I smiled back. Didn't touch my champagne, didn't eat, just survived. The wedding happened. City Hall, not the church Patricia had insisted on. Just me and Ryan and 2 witnesses, my best friend Carla and his cousin Jake, who'd always been decent to me. We'd canceled the big wedding at 2 a.m. the night before, after I told Ryan what I'd heard. He'd wanted to confront his mother right then, to storm into their house and demand an explanation. I said no. I said if he did that, she'd cry and manipulate and somehow make it my fault. Make him feel guilty for defending me, twist the whole thing until I was the villain. I'd seen her do it before. I wasn't going to give her another chance. I said we should just get married without them. He looked at me for a long moment in our dark bedroom, the moonlight catching his face, and said, "You still want to marry me? After everything my family has put you through?" I took his hand. "I'm not marrying your family. I'm marrying you. And I want to do it before she finds another way to ruin it." He pulled me close, kissed my forehead, and said, "Let's go get married." We drove to the courthouse at dawn, the sky turning pink over the highway. I was still in yoga pants and a sweater. He was in jeans and a wrinkled shirt. Neither of us cared. We signed the papers, said our vows in a room that smelled like floor cleaner, kissed on the steps in the morning light while Carla took photos on her phone. I've never felt more married than I did in that moment. We posted one photo on Facebook. Just us on the courthouse steps, grinning like idiots. The caption said, "We did it, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell." Patricia found out when she arrived at the empty church 3 hours later. 400 guests, $10,000 in flowers, a string quartet playing to nobody. The fallout was nuclear. Patricia called 17 times that day, left voicemails that ranged from sobbing to screaming to coldly threatening. She called me a manipulative little gold digger, called Ryan weak and foolish and under my spell. She told him he'd made the worst mistake of his life. She told him I'd isolated him from his family, turned him against his own blood. She told him I was after his money, his name, his future. She told him he'd regret this, that he'd come crawling back when I showed my true colors. He listened to every voicemail, saved them, said someday he might need proof of who she really was. Then he blocked her number. So did I. We spent our wedding night in our apartment, eating Chinese takeout from paper containers, watching old movies on the couch, laughing about the chaos we'd caused. The first year of marriage was surprisingly peaceful. Without his parents constantly in our ears, poisoning every moment, we could just be. We could have dinner without wondering what Patricia would criticize. Could plan our future without Richard's dismissive comments. Could be newlyweds, young and in love and figuring things out, without the constant weight of their disapproval. We both worked hard, saved money, made plans. I got promoted at the firm 3 months after the wedding, moved from staff accountant to senior. Ryan had left his father's company right after we got engaged, refusing to work for a man who treated his fiancée like trash. He joined a different investment firm, smaller but growing, proved himself on his own merits instead of his family name. We were a team, partners in everything, building something that belonged to us alone. We bought a small condo in a nice neighborhood 18 months after the wedding. Nothing fancy, 800 square feet with a view of a parking lot, but ours. We painted the walls ourselves, spent weekends at IKEA arguing about furniture, hung pictures, and planted herbs on the tiny balcony. Our names were on the deed. Our money had made the down payment. Nobody could take it from us. Nobody could tell us we didn't deserve it. Then I found out what Patricia had meant. At least she can't get pregnant to trap him. I made sure of that. I'd been having trouble conceiving. We'd been trying for 6 months, tracking cycles, taking temperatures, doing everything the book said to do. Nothing happening. Month after month, negative tests, crushing disappointment. I told myself it was stress, timing, bad luck. But something felt wrong. My body felt wrong. I went to a specialist. She ran tests. Lots of tests. Blood work, ultrasounds, procedures I don't want to describe. She sat me down in her office with a look on her face that made my stomach drop before she said a word. There was scarring on my fallopian tubes. Significant scarring, old scarring, from an infection that was never properly treated. Did you have a pelvic inflammatory infection in your early 20s? She asked gently. Anything that went untreated or was minimized? I thought back. Remembered being sick right after I started dating Ryan. Stomach cramps, fever, pain that made me double over. Patricia had been concerned, or pretended to be. Had recommended a doctor, a family friend, said he was the best in town and would see me as a personal favor. He'd examined me, prescribed antibiotics, said it was a minor infection, nothing to worry about. Didn't mention follow-ups, didn't suggest additional tests, just patted my hand and told me I'd be fine. I hadn't thought about that appointment in years. Why would I? He was a doctor, Patricia's trusted friend. Why would I question what he told me? I called that doctor's office, requested my records, waited 3 weeks for them to arrive, opened the envelope with shaking hands, read the diagnosis, read it again, read it 3 more times, trying to find the lie. But there was no lie, just the truth, written in clinical language on faded paper. The infection had been significant, serious, required immediate follow-up care, specific treatment protocols, monitoring for complications, none of which I'd received. Because he'd told me everything was fine, because he'd looked me in the eye and said it was nothing serious. Because Patricia had sent me to him. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour holding those records, trying to process what they meant. She'd known. She must have known. Or hoped. Or arranged. I couldn't prove she'd told him to minimize the diagnosis. Couldn't prove she'd known what would happen. But I'd heard her at that rehearsal dinner. At least she can't get pregnant to trap him. I made sure of that. That wasn't a guess. That wasn't a hope. That was a statement of fact. She'd made sure. And now I was holding the evidence of how. Ryan was devastated when I told him. Furious in a way I'd never seen. He called his mother, screaming, accusing. She denied everything. Said the doctor was just incompetent. Said it wasn't her fault. Said I was paranoid and vindictive and looking for someone to blame. Richard got on the line, threatened legal action if Ryan kept making accusations. Ryan told them both to go to hell. We didn't speak to them for 3 years. Those 3 years, we healed, grieved, built a new kind of future. We looked into adoption, into IVF, into all the options. Decided we wanted to focus on each other first, on our careers, on creating stability. I made senior accountant, then manager. Ryan's new company was thriving. We sold the condo and bought a real house, 3 bedrooms, a yard, room for whatever family we'd eventually build. We paid the mortgage down aggressively, saved obsessively. We were 26 and 29, and we had more financial security than most people twice our age. Meanwhile, the Whitfields were crumbling. We heard it through Ryan's cousin Jake, the only family member who still talked to us. Richard had made some bad investments. Really bad. The kind of bad that happens when you think you're smarter than the market. When your ego writes checks your portfolio can't cash. He'd put too much money in tech stocks that tanked. Doubled down on commodities that crashed. Tried to recover with increasingly risky bets that only made things worse. Lost most of the family money chasing returns that never came. Patricia's lifestyle hadn't adjusted. She kept spending like they were still rich. Like the money would magically reappear if she just pretended hard enough. Designer clothes, restaurant dinners, a new car when the old one was only 2 years old. She couldn't accept that the fortune was gone, that the image she'd built her entire identity around was crumbling. so she propped it up with credit cards, loans, lines of credit she couldn't afford to repay. They sold the vacation house first, the one in the Hamptons, the one Patricia had bragged about at every dinner party, the one I'd never been invited to. Then the boat. Then the art collection Richard's father had spent decades assembling. Then the jewelry, piece by piece, including the engagement ring that had been in the family for 4 generations. Patricia cried when that one sold. Jake said it was the first time he'd seen her show genuine emotion about anything other than herself. By the time Patricia called me, they'd lost everything. The bank was taking the house, the mansion she'd walked through like a queen for 30 years. They had nowhere to go. Richard was too proud to ask his son for help. But Patricia wasn't too proud anymore. Desperation had finally humbled her, at least enough to pick up the phone. Not enough to apologize, just enough to beg. I told Ryan about the call that night, watched his face as he processed it. His mother, who'd tried to ruin me, who'd possibly sabotaged my ability to have children, was now homeless and asking for help. From me. The girl who wasn't good enough. "What do you want to do?" I asked him. He was quiet for a long time. "Part of me wants to help them," he said finally. "They're my parents. They raised me. But then I think about what she did, what she might have done. And I can't forgive that. I don't know if I ever can." "You don't have to decide tonight," I said. "This is your choice. I'll support whatever you decide." He pulled me close. "You're better than they ever deserved. Better than they ever knew." He called them a week later. I listened from the next room. Patricia did most of the talking, crying about how hard things were, how unfair it all was, how they'd lost everything and had nowhere to turn. Richard was silent in the background, too proud to beg but desperate enough to let his wife do it. Ryan listened. Then he asked one question. "Did you know what that doctor would do to Brooke? Did you send her there hoping it would happen?" Silence. A long, damning silence. Then Patricia, her voice cracking. "I was protecting you." "I was trying to." "That's enough," Ryan said. "I have my answer." "Ryan, please. We're your parents. You lost that right when you sabotaged my wife's health. When you tried to make sure she couldn't give me children. You spent years telling me I deserved better. Now I'm telling you, you should find someone better to help you. Because we're done." He hung up, sat on the couch with his head in his hands. I sat next to him, didn't speak, just waited. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes were wet. "Is it wrong that I don't feel guilty?" "No," I said. "It's not wrong. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival." "She really did it," he said. "She really tried to make sure you couldn't have kids, just to break us apart." "I know. And she still thinks she was right. Still thinks she was protecting me." "Some people never learn," I said. "But that's not our problem anymore." We didn't hear from them directly after that. Jake kept us updated. They moved into a small apartment in a part of town Patricia would have sneered at 5 years ago. Richard got a job at a car dealership. Patricia learned to budget for the first time in her life. They were humbled, according to Jake. Changed, maybe. He thought we should give them another chance. Ryan said he'd think about it. That was a year ago. He's still thinking. I'm 28 now. Ryan is 31. We're in the process of adopting a little girl from foster care. Her name is Maya. She's 4 years old with dark curly hair and a smile that could light up a stadium. Patricia doesn't know about her. Doesn't get to know. Maybe someday, if she ever truly changes, truly understands what she did and why it was wrong, we'll reconsider. But that's not forgiveness. That's a door we might open someday. Right now, it stays closed. I still think about that rehearsal dinner sometimes, standing in that hallway, hearing my future mother-in-law say I wasn't good enough. I think about how I almost believed her, almost let her voice become my voice, telling me I didn't deserve the man I loved, the life I was building, the future I was fighting for. She wanted me to feel small. She wanted me to disappear. Instead, I'm still here, still married to her son, still building a family she'll never be part of. Not because I'm vindictive, because I'm protective. Of myself, of Ryan, of Maya, of the life we've built with our own hands, in spite of everyone who said we couldn't. If you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever had someone try to sabotage your future, if you've ever had to cut off family to protect your peace, this story is for you. You don't owe anyone access to your life. You don't owe anyone forgiveness without change. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting yourself from people who tried to destroy you. Sometimes the door stays closed. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had in-laws who tried to break you apart? Did they ever face consequences? I read every story. Subscribe for more stories about people who proved everyone wrong. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's building exactly the life they said you didn't deserve.